I officially welcome you all to the historical Cape Coast Castle. My name is Harry, and I'll be your guide. The tour will take us about 45 minutes, and then throughout this 45 minutes, we shall visit the male slave dungeon, the female slave dungeon, the condemned cell, the punishment cell, the courtyard of the castle, the door of no return, the door of return. From there, we move upstairs, see the Palava Hall, where buying and selling of human beings took place. From there, we bring the guided tour to an end. But before we begin with the tour of the castle, I'm going to give you a brief history about the castles we have in Ghana and then the transatlantic slave trade on the west coast of Africa. Basically, in Ghana, there are three castles dotted along the coast of Ghana. We have St. George's Castle in Elimina, built by the Portuguese in 1482. We also have the Christiansborg Castle in Usu, Accra, built by the Danes in 1661. Finally, we have Cape Coast Castle, built by the British in 1665. And so, out of these three castles, Elimina Castle or the St. George's Castle, it is the biggest and the oldest European structure in tropical West Africa. Cape Coast Castle, where we are at the moment, it is the smallest among the three. However, Cape Coast Castle itself, it was once built as a fort known as the Carriosberg Fort by the Swedish in 1653. Later, the Danes came in for the Swedish, they fought them and drove them away, so they took in charge of the fort. The Dutch also came in, they also fought the Danes and also drove them away. Following the subsequent Anglo-Dutch War between the British and then the Dutch, the British also came in, they also fought the Dutch, defeated them and then took away the fort. So basically, it was a British who developed the fort into the castle status as we see today. And so Cape Coast Castle, as it exists today, it was built over a period of 300 years. However, slavery in Africa, it all started at a time when the Spaniards got to what they call the New World. Upon getting to the New World, gold and silver mines were open, sugar, tobacco, cotton plantations were established. In as much they wanted the wealth from the New World, they were not prepared to do the hard labor. They subjected the natives to do the hard labor. Due to European diseases, the natives were not surviving. They needed to get people to replace the natives. One Catholic missionary by name Bartholomew de las Cascas, he suggested that blacks taken from Africa should be made to work in the plantations. In his opinion, he said Africans, they were doing the same work under similar climatic condition in Africa, and also Africans are much stronger. For that reason, blacks should be made to work in a plantation. Somewhere around 1512, they took a couple of black people from Spain to Hispaniola. Others also say to Santo Domingo. That is where they were tested on the plantations, and then true to Bartholomew de las Cascas claim, they all proved to be physically strong, which made the demand for black people rise. And this began the unfortunate story of misery and pain of black people, the forced exodus of blacks and Africans from their motherland to the world unknown. The trade wasn't in Ghana only. The whole of West Africa, from wherever these enslaved Africans were captured along West Africa, they would have to walk barefooted to the castles. But before they were brought down to the castles, they were first of all taken to Asan slave market. That is where these enslaved Africans took their last African bath. But please remember, not everyone went through the slave market. Those of the captives who went through the slave market would have to come from a specific direction. Those of the captives who were being captured from the northern part of the country, like Tamale, Mase, Salaga, Tuchima, they were the ones who would have to go through Asan Manson. Anybody coming from different angle would also have to use different slave market. And so those coming from the northern part of the country, they get to a village called Asan Mansu. Within the village, you can locate a river called the Oche River. That is where the captives were made to take their last African concept about the slave market was that it was because they've walked several miles before getting to that very spot. Many of them were tired, others were dirty, and so there was a need for them to allow them to take their bath, shave them, apply pomade on them, just for the old to appear younger in order to attract higher prices when they get to the castle. That was the whole concept about the slave market. From there, others came in here. Others too might continue the journey to the Elmira castle. It all depends on who went there to buy who. If it is a British, they move down to this castle. If it is a Portuguese, they continue the journey to the Elmira castle. But just inside the castle, the captives were being branded with branded irons. Why were they being branded? It is because different slave companies were buying the captives. These companies wanted to identify whoever they were going to be bought. And so they introduced a branding iron. A branding iron, it is a metal. Just on top of the metal, the slave company has its name or probably has a company's logo on top of the metal. All they would have to do is to insert the metal stick into fire to get very hot. Once they pick the stick from the fire, they place it straight on their chest, at their arm, or at their back for easy identification. The branding alone was even enough to kill them. After that has been done, they were then separated. The men were kept down here, whilst the women were also kept in the female slave dungeon. Why in the dungeons? In the dungeons because these dungeons served as a transit point for the captives. They need to stay down here from 2 weeks to 3 months, depending on when the slave ships will get to the coast. Once the slave ship gets to the coast, they would have to transport all the captives to the Americas and the Caribbean. The likes of Jamaica, Brazil, Argentina, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Virginia, New York. Only few others were taken to Europe. Over there, they auction the captives. They sell them out to plantation owners for them to work in their newfound plantations. The trade officially ended in England in 1807, but then those of the British inside this very edifice, they refused to end the trade in 1807, but then they rather continue with the trade till 1833, which was finally abolished in here. The trade lasted for more than 400 years, more than 4 centuries. So I'm going to pause for a while. If your question is you'd love to ask, please do so before we begin with the talk.
I think he said it all. We are still in shock. Yes. I'm not ready.
So we're going to move down. The floor slopes a bit slippery in here. Let us take our time. Naturally, this part of the chamber is naturally brighter as compared to the remaining chambers because of this open space up here. From this very point, not everyone will continue the journey from this point. From this point, they need to separate the weaker ones from the stronger ones. The weaker ones will be held in this room for doctors or physicians in the castle to examine or check on them. Only the stronger ones will have to continue after the sorting has been done, the stronger ones wouldn't move back towards the main entrance. No, they would exit the dungeon through an underground passage. Behind this wall, there was an underground passage, very big and very wide, about 70 meters from this point. Only the stronger ones will have to make their way through the tunnel. They walk through till they get to the door of no return, where the women can join them. They all move straight into the ships. The tunnel itself, it has been blocked by the British in 1833. For that reason, we cannot move through this tunnel. However, when we step outside, we'll get the opportunity to see how big the tunnel is, where exactly the tunnel ends. But from this point, I'm sorry we can't go through from this very point. But these are flowers or wreath also in here. These were brought in here by Africans, African Americans, people from the Caribbean. They brought them in here to pay homage to their ancestors, to our brothers and sisters who lost their lives doing the trade. They mostly bring these flowers in here during Pan-African Historical Theatre Festival, PANAFest, or Emancipation Day. That is when these are normally brought in here. And in 2019, Ghana celebrated the year of return, of which many of these were also brought in here. But finally, this is a shrine, African traditional temple. In the olden days, before the Europeans had not introduced Christianity to Africans, or the Arabs had not introduced Islam to Africans, we as Africans, we had our own way of communicating to the Supreme Being. We communicate to the Supreme Being through natural things like stones, rivers, mountains, trees. It is our belief that once we pray or worship through some of these natural phenomena, our petitions will get to the ancestral world. The ancestors, together with the deities, will carry our petitions to the Supreme Being. We as Africans believe that the ancestors and the deities are more closer to God than any other person. That was the mode of worship, and that is how we Africans communicate to the Supreme Being before the coming of the Europeans. However, in Cape Coast here, we have 77 of such shrines in the town, or 77 deities in the town. This is one of them. It's called Nana Taber. That is the name of the deity. However, this shrine of this deity was on this very land before this whole edifice was built. But then after the Europeans acquired the land from the chiefs, they were denying the local people from worshipping from this side. They performed a sacrifice and took the shrine from here to another place. Later, when the trade ended in the castle, that is when they felt they need to bring it back to its original position. And so all that I'm trying to put across is that when the captives were in here, this wasn't here. It was only brought back when the trade ended in the castle. That is how come today we still see a shrine in here. It is still an active shrine for the indigenous people in the town. Any question, please?
The alcohol.
Okay, so
Yeah, but isn't there some kind of, because each snaps on like.
So, we as Africans, before we can communicate to the deities or the ancestors, we need to pray, and we pray by pouring libation, which the libation could be done with alcohol, and because just as you see over here,
Yeah,
it could
but
be done by
it's the
water.
actual company that produces it. It's not Ghanaian, it's not African, is it?
No, I think it's a German company.
Wine or competition or something.
So after being pronounced a rock star, which was for me very exciting, I was able to drive a few hours down to the Gold Coast where the slave fortresses were. And what that exactly means is these forts were built, and that's where the slaves were put, and then they were deported to North America. It started all the way back from the Portuguese and the English and the Americans. They were bartering in the slave trade. And it starts with, we go into the dungeon where it's like underground and it's really dark and dank and mildewy, and you can almost hear the crashing of the waves from outside. And you go into this room and there's no ventilation, nothing, and they would put about 200 to 300 Africans in it, just shut the doors and lock it. So I'm only imagining like what these people who are injured and hurt and fighting and whipped and beaten, what life must be like.
So they shackled both the legs and the arms all together. The captives slept on straw mats on the floor, fed twice daily, in the morning and in the evening. It is believed that those confined to this particular section were never given chance to go out to eat. And there was an opening here where sometimes the officers stood and then threw out the food to the captives here. So over here, survival of the fittest was the order of the day.
One of the things that really caught me off guard and I found really educational is the concept that African tribal chiefs who had been warring would often take prisoners and then they would sell them. They were taking people from other warring villages and bringing them to the dungeons and then trading them for money, for rum, for guns.
The captives here were grouped into two. The in-house captives were used to construct the castle, whereas the commercial ones were sent to the Caribbean and American lands. It is the cell popularly called the condemned cells. Those revolted male captives who used the shackles of the one of you to fight the English were selected to this area. No food, no water, no light, no air.
It shows the extent to which very minor differences can lead us to commit, shall I say, crime. I call it a crime. Crime against ourselves. What we have to channel is that it just got to be a prayer that we put out there that whatever is dividing people that could lead people to something like this never ever happens again. Never ever.
Saying we are one body before the Creator.
And then finally they take us to what they call the door of no return, which is this big wooden door that when it opens, you hear it cranking. People were taken, put on boats, set to sea, and never to return again.
The wealth of the South. We're talking about wealth in enslaved human beings. In fact, those enslaved human beings in the pre-Civil War period range, depending on the year, between 15 and 20% of the total wealth in the U.S. That means that enslaved people are worth more than all the factories, all the stocks and bonds, and all the currency combined. In the 1850s, an enslaved young man about 18, 19, 20 years old in New Orleans goes for anywhere between $1,000 and $1,500. If we account for inflation, that $1,000 to $1,500 actually is equivalent to about $230,000 to $250,000. It's a ton of money.
And they are sold with no particular consideration to parentage.
You can't tell me to leave my family. I ain't going nowhere for you. You understand me?
There are very, very few cases where it disturbs the property relation. Men might acknowledge the biological tie, but they don't often recognize the kinship tie.
Thank you. Your Chicken George has skill.
As one gentleman to another, I'd like to buy the boy from you.
Because slavery is so central to their economies, they become very invested in making sure that slavery persists. And so that's where you get things like the idea that slave status is heritable through the line of the mother. The slave societies of the Americas are the most brutal and oppressive because they went so far in the direction of making slavery an enclosed system. Different states passed laws trying to limit the freedom of slave owners to free enslaved people. But much more often, there were stipulations that a person who was freed had to leave the state within 90 days, within 6 months. That reflects a fear that free Black people, simply by virtue of being free, are dangerous to a slave society. And if you have too many free Black people kind of functioning in your community, they advertise the possibility of freedom to the enslaved population.
Just finding the power within that system to survive took a tremendous amount of courage. And it really is a testament to the human spirit that African Americans were able to survive that system and ultimately to be able to do great things coming out of that system.
It's time your family